Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. We'll get into a couple of, well, maybe even 3 or 4 interesting plants this week. This is, of course, we'll start with a couple of plants from the Spring Foraging Cookbook, and then we'll get some from my book, Medicinal Shrubs. Medicinal Shrubs and Woody Vines of the American Southeast is what it's called, but as I always say, I just use the Southeast as a reference. Where I live in the mountains of North Carolina has a climate that's similar to pretty much all of New England, most of the Midwest, and up into Canada. Come down the mountain a little bit, and I can be in sand hills, I can be in hardwood forests that are going to be similar to basically the entire southeast, going all the way out west to the Mississippi. And then, of course, I can get down coastal areas, which are subtropical. In North Carolina, we have like every climate in the temperate areas of the world, really. I mean, it's crazy. What is the name of that island? I've forgotten it again. But anyway, where I live in Avery County, it's a temperate rainforest, which is just like, was it Vancouver Island? Yeah, I think it's Vancouver Island. Um, West coast of Canada, west of, and a little northwest of Washington State. I mean, identical. We get 270 days a year of precipitation. We have the same climate. So, I mean, I can go up the mountain and be in an arid, dry mountain climate. About 1,000 feet up, I can go 1,000 feet down, and I'm in a totally different environment. So, when I say of the American Southeast, just pretty much know if it grows in my area, it probably grows in your area. The only thing that would be different would be like a high desert. That's going to be different, or an absolute jungle in South America or something. That's going to be different, or the North Pole or South Pole. But for the most part, I mean, we have mushrooms that grow here naturally, and herbs like ginseng and different things. That I mean, our climate is so much like the mountainous regions of China that actually scientists, whatever you want to call them, geologists, whatever they are, think that at one point the Appalachian Mountains and the Himalayan mountains might have been attached. We may have actually come from the same place in time. So it's really, I mean, if it grows in England, it grows in North Carolina. If it grows in France, it grows in North Carolina. If it grows in Germany, it grows in North Carolina. And if it grows in North Carolina, it grows in all 50 states somewhere at least. So, all right, so let's start with water lily. And this is out of the Spring Foraging Cookbook. There are a few varieties of water lily, and you'll most likely find one in a pond near you. The root lies at the bottom, just under the mud, and it makes a nice tuber for eating if you can get to it before the water freezes or thaws. And while it's good, it is so not worth trying for when the water's frozen. In fact, it's like super difficult to get to in an ideal situation. I mean, even if like the pond had been drained and it was the middle of summer and you're out there, it's really hard to dig up. In spring, the new plant forms on the surface and very slowly unfolds into a common aquatic plant that we recognize. And the leaves are tender and it's a good one to forage. The leaves and unopened flower buds make a nice cooked vegetable using the steam saute method, where we just wash them, don't dry them, put them in a pan with some oil, put the lid on until it comes up to a simmer, take the lid off and let the water evaporate, and then just let them saute in the butter or oil, whatever you've used. Really, the best way to cook most plants. And this last week had some good Smilax leaves, greenbrier. There are so many varieties of greenbrier. I don't know if this is bullbrier or catbrier or common greenbrier or whatever you want to call it. Smilax bona nox, goodnight Smilax. I don't know how it got that name. That's kind of weird, because if you run into a briar in the night, you're not having a good night, are you? But anyway, just did the steam sauteed method, and while they're a little tougher than most greens, actually, I don't mind that at all. They have a nice chew to them, and the flavor was delicious. Just simply cooked like that, a little salt, a little oil, a little water. Ended up eating a bunch of them couple of nights in a row as a side dish, and then putting them on burritos. And they're slightly bitter, almost like a cross between spinach and turnip greens or collard greens. I like them a lot, actually. And I wiped out every greenbrier in the yard, picking the leaves, and they're growing back, so I'll get at least 1 or 2 more harvests as they keep putting on new leaves. So great way to manage your briars. But going back to water lily, the leaves unopened and flower buds make a nice cooked vegetable, steam sauteed method, as I just said. Use lotus and water shield similarly. We'll get into water shield another day. The plant is most popular in Asian cuisine, and really, while they use just about every part of the plant, one thing we really don't utilize enough here in America is the seeds of the lotus plant. You've probably seen these ornamentally in flower arrangements. It's like this kind of flat brown cone with all these little round seeds in there. Those are actually like delicious nuts, and you can absolutely harvest them and eat them and just enjoy them. They're fantastic. A guy on YouTube, I cannot remember his name. I'll try to get that for you the next episode, has done an entire episode on harvesting the seeds of lotus or water lily. Really, really good. But the root, as I said, difficult to get to. If you can get it, it's really good just roasted with onions, olive oil, and salt. And of course some parsley. Parsley goes well with everything. Mainly it's the bulb that's used in stir fries and such. It's crunchy, it's mildly flavored. Slice it, toss it with green onions, bamboo shoots, water chestnuts, those little ears of corn in the cans, that you get in a Chinese buffet. They're pretty tasty, actually. They kind of, I don't know, they make a stir fry more fun, I think. Throw in any meat or seafood you like. Fermented black beans are a really good ingredient. Really hard to get in North Carolina. I don't know about where you live, but I have to go to a Chinese grocer, an Asian grocery store. I mean, specifically Chinese, but if there's one that caters to different ethnicities, you might find it. They're very good. They're just little black soybeans that are fermented, and you see them a lot in like Cantonese food, I think probably more than any others. If you can't find it, there is a fermented black bean paste that you can find in most grocery stores. It's got a lot of additives, got a lot of seasoning. Use it in a pinch, but if you can actually get the fermented black beans, they're much better. Of course, soy sauce, and my preference is dark mushroom soy sauce. Again, hard to find. If you can get it, that stuff is so good. If not, just get, just regular old Kikkoman natural soy sauce. Don't get the fake stuff. It's really nasty, actually. Get some real soy sauce, naturally fermented. Makes a huge difference. A little chicken broth, a little sesame oil, and either a splash of Chinese cooking wine or sherry. Really good. It makes a surprisingly good stir fry. Now, if you can't get Shaoxin wine, which is the Chinese cooking wine, definitely go with sherry. You can use sweet sherry, you can use dry sherry. You can also make your own rice wine. I do this fairly often because I like rice wine. It's more of a Chinese version of rice wine than Japanese sake, but you could certainly use sake in its place. get a short grain rice. Get rice for making sushi. So that use a Japanese short grain rice, or better yet, use South Carolina Gold rice. The original rice grown in America was a short grain rice. Cook up the rice. This is a shortcut way. Okay, there are more traditional ways of making rice. You can use rice wine. You can use koji. You can I think saccharinize is what they call it. They're each, like China, Korea, Japan, they all have different ways of making rice wine. You can actually just cook up the rice, put in a couple of cups of sugar, a little more water, about twice water to rice by volume. Put it in a fermentation vessel and get some of those Chinese yeast balls. They're used for making rice wine in China. They actually have koji in them. Koji will convert the starch of rice into sugar. You've added additional sugar, so you should get a good fermentation going. It's a little slow. It's a lot slower than making grape wine or any other kind of fruit wine. Slower than beer, certainly. But, let it cool. Crush in a couple of yeast balls, put on fermentation lock, and really within a couple of weeks, you can go ahead and drain the wine off of the yeast. It will ferment. I mean, if you let it go a month, it's going to be very, very sour, and it's going to be fairly strong in alcohol. But it gets most of the alcohol in the first 2 weeks and retains a mild sweetness, so it's not just sharp, because it can really get quite dry very quickly. So you might want to taste it, after a week, maybe taste it every couple of days and see what you think. Makes an excellent cooking wine, makes a good rice wine for drinking. It's actually pretty good. One of the main reasons I do it, though, is because the lees, the leftover, basically digested rice, the koji's a fungus, and of course yeast is is koji a fungus or a bacteria? I can't remember, but of course yeast is a fungus. Anyway, the two of them work on basically digesting the rice. You can take those lees and drain them and put them in a container in your refrigerator. They'll keep for years, actually, and they're an excellent addition to other foods. They have a really good fermented, slightly sour taste, somewhat of a taste like you've added a little wine to something you're cooking, often included in soups, stews, just a spoonful here and there. Or you can use them to actually make pickles. There's a whole lot of Japanese pickles. Tsukemono, I think is what they're called. But some of them are made using sake leaves. Well, you can use the leaves from your rice wine. Basically, you take your cucumbers or any of the vegetable, carrots, radishes, whatever, do them in salt, let them draw out some of the moisture, then put them in a container and put your rice leaves over them. A couple other ingredients, a little bit of miso usually goes in there, and they will pickle overnight. It's amazing how fast they pickle, because those rice leaves are full of live, active, fermenting bacteria, and so, of course, is the miso. So you put it in there. You can add other ingredients. There are lots of recipes. You can find them in books or online. You make delicious pickles. They're like a sweet and sour pickle with a little bit of a wine kind of flavor. They're actually really good. So that's one of the main reasons I actually make rice wine. And maybe once a year I'll make a batch, because those leaves last forever. But the wine will go sour very quickly. It really is not one that you're going to want to, if you make it the way I described, you're not going to want to store it for a long time. You can make wonderful rice wine vinegar out of that wine, though. If it happens to start going sour, go down to the store and get some Bragg's vinegar, the apple cider vinegar that's got the vinegar mother, the kombucha-looking leathery thing in there. Put that in to your rice wine, and it will convert the alcohol into acids, and you'll have delicious rice wine, which is so good in a salad dressing or for making pickles, or, it's a cool thing to do, I think. So, let's see. As I've stated before, I am not an expert in Asian cooking, but that stir fry I described earlier is really good, and it really works for my taste. I've seen recipes for congee, which is basically a rice porridge, I should say, not a pudding, but a rice porridge, also using lotus. Not tried it. I'm not really big into traditional congee, but when I'm out fishing, sometimes I'll make it, because it's a good way to add some calories to the diet and use up a little fish. Like, you know, basically you put your fish heads in the pot and bones of any fish you caught, so you can go ahead and grill them up, eat the meat, and then throw the bones in the pot. A few small fish, if you catch a few minnows or something that you're not using for bait, they can go in the congee pot. A couple of crawfish. I mean, if you just 4 or 5 little crawfish aren't going to make a meal, but in this they will. And whatever wild veggies I can find. It doesn't really matter. Burdock is of course perfect because it's an Asian vegetable to start with, but you can throw in your docks and your sorrels and your ramps and your wild onions and whatever you like, whatever you can find that's edible and good. And it's a mild to American taste. It's a rice porridge. You put in your fish, you put in your vegetables, you put in your rice, a little bit of salt, and boil it until you can eat it. But it's actually really tasty. I mean, a little black pepper in there, and it's really good. And it's if you're more familiar with traditional Japanese and Chinese food, you got some suggestions you want to send me, like, add this, add that, I'd be thrilled to hear it. But, understand I'm not in the woods with like bonito shavings and seaweed. I'm in the woods with what I've got in the creek and in the pond and in the woods. So, yeah, it's good. And of course, in Southern cooking, we often combine chicken with rice. Very similarly. In fact, there's a really traditional dish from sort of South Carolina around the Dillon area. That's like between Myrtle Beach and Florence, if you don't know where that is, and up into eastern North Carolina, at least in like Bladen and Duplin County, maybe getting as far as Wilmington, of the chicken bog. I've given you the chicken bog recipe before. This was traditional for every like family reunion, church gathering, and political rally. We made a chicken bog. Everybody made a chicken bog, and there are people, brag about their chicken bog recipes. It is so simple. Again, that's where rice culture began in America. Carolina gold rice was grown in that region of like between Georgetown and Wilmington, Georgetown, South Carolina, and Wilmington, North Carolina. So what they would do, whenever you had a get together, you'd either make barbecue, which of course we're barbecue fanatics, or you get a big old wash pot, a big cauldron, and you would take a few chickens, clean them up, pluck them, usually just throw them right in the pot with water, onions, usually smoked sausage, and rice, salt and black pepper. That's the basic recipe. Now, depending on your family, you might make it a little different. You might throw in a few cayenne peppers if you like a little spicy. My family would, most would not. You might throw in some celery. Again, my family would, most would not. But anyway, you boil it all up, and it's just this thick, hearty rice stew or rice porridge with shredded up chicken. Once everything's cooked, you pull the chicken out, you let it cool, pull all the meat off the bones, and chop everything up and put it back in. It's got the nice, porky flavor of the sausage, and you've got the onions. It's very simple. It's very filling. It's very, very, very enjoyable. It's one of the most simple dishes I know that most everybody loves. Now, if you go down a little bit further in South Carolina, you get into hash, barbecue hash. Another thing I absolutely adore. Not made basically at all in North Carolina. It's essentially a stew. Sometimes they put rice in it, sometimes they don't. I've had probably, well, I don't know, probably half the barbecue hash I've had has had rice in it, and some hasn't. But it's using the organ meats of the pig, especially the liver. A lot of mustard, a lot of onion. Again, depending on your family, you may put in hot pepper, you may not. It just depends on your heritage. You may throw in some chicken livers and hearts and such with that too if you've been saving them up. You can absolutely combine pork and chicken in that one. It's really strong in flavor and scent, and, especially depending on who makes it. Some people even put chitlins into it. Real just old country cooking, mix of cultures. You've got the African, Indian, Scots, Irish, English, French all coming together. And I love, usually tomatoes go in a hash as well. Sometimes they just put in ketchup and mustard. I mean, it just depends on who makes it. It's one of those backyard things most people don't eat anymore. But I'm telling you, It's good stuff. Barbecue hash is really very good. It's the way to use all the offcuts of meat, the organ meats and such. It is strong, but if it's made right, it's really, really good. Now, let me think. Where is the town? It's over toward Greenwood, South Carolina. They really famous for it, barbecue hash. Maybe Abbeville. The band, the Swinging Medallions, came from there. The ones that did Double Shot of My Baby's Love in the '60s. They were the sort of the hometown band. And yeah, if you're ever wandering through there in the fall when they're doing barbecue cook-offs and contests and such, stop in and get some barbecue hash. The stuff is amazing. I don't know that you're going to find a chicken bog served in a restaurant, but if you do, give it a try. And that's more on like the tamer side of the taste buds, whereas the barbecue hash is on the more adventurous side. It's all good. It is all so good. So did Brunswick stew. Brunswick stew probably originated in Brunswick, Virginia. So they say. I actually think it originated in Brunswick Town, North Carolina. Now, of course, Brunswick, Georgia also claims it, but theirs only dates to about the 1800s, where Brunswick County, Virginia can make a claim to about 1750. But Brunswick Town, North Carolina, would have been making it in the 1600s. And it's a town that no longer exists. It was on the coast. It was actually a trading port between people coming from Bermuda, which is just like, 100 miles off the coast of North Carolina. So you get a Creole influence. And the Native Americans that had corn and lima beans, that had been brought from Peru to Mexico up into the Americas, by that time, up into North America by that time. So corn and lima beans, which would not have appeared in Virginia at that time in the 1600s, they would have been by the 1700s. So, but also tomatoes, and they were not eating tomatoes in Virginia before Thomas Jefferson. They were among Creole cultures and Native American cultures and some folks in coastal North Carolina. So this is why I say there's a good argument to be made that Brunswick stew comes from what was once Brunswick Town, North Carolina. So that's just, it's so good. And everybody's got their variation on it. Usually it's 3 meats. In modern times, it's usually beef, pork, and chicken. It really should be made with game. You can have beef, pork, and chicken, but you should also have some squirrel, rabbit, deer meat, wild birds of whatever type you can get. There's a similar version made with all seafood, often called frogmore stew down in South Carolina. But anyway, you put those meats in a big pot, like I said, big old cauldron, wash pot, whatever. Throw in some onions, potatoes usually. So that's optional, of course. Lima beans and corn, okra. Okra came from Africa. Again, you can see why that port town of Brunswick Town makes more sense. Tomatoes, tomatoes, okra, corn, lima beans. Anything else is optional. Onions are not optional. You got to have your onions. But of course, you could add peas or beans or whatever you wanted according to taste, along with those meats, and just cook it up into a big hunter stew essentially. And that's Brunswick stew, and it's phenomenal as well. So there's my little culinary tour of the stews of the American South for today. Now let's move on to another edible, which is also medicinal, and it is wild geranium. Now, generally, and this is growing all over my yard right now. I've got tons of wild geranium this year. Generally, the European version is called cranesbill or the herb Robert. You have to love that, right? But the cranesbill comes from the shape of its seed pod, which looks like a long beak. One native to my region is essentially, the one I should say native to my region is essentially identical to cranesbill, and used identically. All geraniums, though, even the cultivated, are quite tasty, but also astringent. And of course, the ones you buy in flower pots may be treated with all kinds of fertilizers and chemicals, so you probably don't want to eat them. Do look for them in the wild, but be sure of your identification, because really in the early spring, aconite can have a similar looking leaf to wild geranium. So I would wait for this one to flower before I harvest it, just to be sure. I don't have any aconite growing on my property, but I do have tons of wild geraniums. Even so, I don't pick them till they flower, because I don't want to make that mistake. That could be a deadly mistake. So medicinally, they're one of the best mild herbs for treating diarrhea. I enjoy the tender spring leaves in salads and the more mature greens as pot herbs, but I think it's best to eat this plant in moderation. After all, it could be, as they used to call, griping in large amounts. It could cause cramping and constipation and such because of that astringency. Geraniums make a really nice tea as well. The true Alifaria plant, or stork's bill, is differentiated from geraniums, but it's very similar, just a little less astringent, and you can pretty much use them interchangeably. I really like this one either as a topping for deviled eggs or an egg salad. The sourness brightens up the egg mixture, and of course eggs can be a bit bland on their own. So for both dishes, boil a few eggs. Don't overdo it. Just boil until they're done. Not raw, but not rubbery. I don't like overboiled eggs. If you do, go for it. I would give you instructions for boiled eggs, but how long you boil your eggs depends entirely upon your elevation. So a book that says boil an egg for 4 minutes, they rarely take that into consideration because the higher you go in elevation, the faster your eggs cook if you're boiling. It has to do with the atmospheric pressure on the water. Basically, water boils at a lower temperature at a higher elevation. So eggs boil much faster at a higher elevation. And for both, I would include some chopped chives. I'm talking for both when I mean deviled eggs or egg salad. So definitely some chopped chives or wild onions and garlic. Absolutely parsley. Gotta add your parsley. If you haven't figured it out by now, I add parsley to basically everything that isn't a dessert. Parsley is like my go-to herb. Some people like to tap the eggs before boiling to find which end has the air pocket, and then pierce the air pocket. Just pierce that part of the shell with a thumbtack. That'll allow the sulfur gas to escape, and your eggs won't have a sulfury smell to them, or that little greenish tint around the yolk when it boils. Totally optional. You absolutely don't have to do that. And the fresher your eggs are, the less necessary that is. So I don't bother if I have good fresh eggs, especially. So once they're boiled, crack and peel the shell off the eggs when they're done. And that's easiest if you do it under running tap water. It makes peeling eggs so much easier. For deviled eggs, slice the eggs in half lengthwise. Scoop out the yolks and put them in a bowl. Add just enough mayonnaise, mustard, and pickle juice or vinegar to bring them together into a paste. Mix them with a little sweet pickle relish and or some chopped wild geranium, which would be delicious in there. You can use as much geranium as you like, but go light on the relish. You don't want your eggs to taste sweet, in other words, unless that's what you're going for. It's not what I would go for. Salt and pepper to taste. Scoop the mix up, put a spoonful at a time. Well, take it up about a spoonful at a time and pack it in the hollow of the boiled egg whites and serve with a little dusting of paprika or cayenne just to make it look fancy. It always looks better if it has a little color. For the egg salad, just mash up the whole boiled egg, peeled of course, the whites and yellows together. Mix in everything, like I said, for the deviled eggs. Mix in a little mayonnaise, a little mustard, a little relish if you like, a little pickle, a little chopped wild geranium, some wild onions, anything you like, really. And serve this as a sandwich filling on a good homemade bread. You can add some leaves of other greens to the sandwich, like cress, dandelions, spinach, any lettuces you might be growing. A few dashes of hot sauce are always really good. I bake sourdough bread about once a week or so that's sort of a regular sandwich for me, and I really like a slice of ham on it. Egg salad with a slice of ham or some leftover like grilled or broiled chicken. Just fantastic, really. Hard to beat, especially with a couple of bitter wild greens on there. So, as for the medicinal herb of the week, and as I said, geranium's a very good medicinal herb, but now we're going to talk about something you don't want to eat. In fact, we're going to talk about two things you don't want to eat. The first is a shrub called Durca in Latin, or Eastern Leatherwood. And there are two varieties of Durca in herbal medicine that have documented use, I should say. Durca occidentalis, that means essentially Western leatherwood, and Durca palustris. There are a couple others. There's a couple I can't pronounce actually, like Thymicalaceae. I don't know. Anyway, only Durca palustris, Eastern leatherwood, is native to my region. And Resources of the Southern Fields and Forests states that the berries are said to be narcotic and poisonous, and the bark has a nauseous odor and an acrid taste. yielding its virtues to alcohol. So if for some reason you wanted to be nauseous, you would make a tincture of this. 8 grains of the powdered bark will produce violent vomiting followed by purging. So throwing up followed by diarrhea. Why would you ever want to do that? Well, maybe you ate something bad. Okay, maybe you took something toxic. It also helps break a severe fever. So it does actually have medicinal use. Now, this is interesting. When applied to the skin, it blisters. However, so it has a blistering rubification property. The juice applied to the nerve of a painful tooth will provide relief. And in diseases with acrid masticatories, it may be serviceable. Bigelow says the decoction is sudorific, that means inducing sleep, that's the narcotic principle, but also expectorant, and considers it good. The bark is also uncommonly tough and was used by Indians for cordage. The wood is very hard and pliant. So it's a good cordage plant, good hardwood. Don't take it unless you want to throw up. Now, but again, if it's also an expectorant and you've got a high fever and you've got serious congestion, could be worth looking into. I would consider that sort of an emergency. I'm not going to go for it. But he said the twigs are as strong and pliable as those of the lime tree, that's linden or basswood, and it was good for carving and little rungs on furniture and such. And interestingly, the snails apparently particularly like to eat it, so you could use it to bait snails. Why would you bait snails? Well, snails are actually quite edible and delicious. I have done a whole show on that. If you like escargot, American snails are actually an invasive species for the most part. Brown snails and the turban snail, brought here by immigrants. People spend a lot of money on pesticides and poisons trying to get rid of them. The best thing to do is eat them. And if you don't want to eat them yourself, feed them to your chickens, because chickens love them. But now let's get into more of the medicinal properties. King's American Dispensatory of 1898 had it listed in official medicine. After describing it and saying that it had been used a lot for making baskets and paper and all that, it said under action, medicinal uses, and dosage. The bark is acrid, rubefacient, and vesicant when fresh. Vesicant means it brings up the blood vessels. It says that it could cause gastric heat with uneasiness. That's not good. In contact with the skin, it produces rubification followed by blistering, and the sores it occasions are frequently difficult to heal, forming a very indolent and obstinate ulcer. So you don't want to have this stuff on your skin. If chewed, it causes salivation with burning pain on the tongue, gums, etc., and thus has proved as useful as an irritant in paralysis of the tongue, toothache, facial neuralgia. So sort of like, how cloves or cinnamon have that hot nature and can be used to kind of soothe a sore tooth, or apparently paralysis of the tongue. That's the way they're using it. Bigelow says that a decoction of the bark may be used as sudorific and expectorant. The berries produce vomiting and are said to be a narcotic poison, so definitely stay away from the berries. Now, it's still used somewhat in modern use. Plants for Future says, Leatherwood was employed medicinally by a number of Native American Indian tribes who used it to treat a wide variety of ailments. It is little used in modern herbalism and should be carried out with caution, as even minute doses can cause salivation and burning of the tongue. A tea made from the bark is laxative. Another report says it is purgative and emetic and can produce violent vomiting. An infusion of the roots has been used in the treatment of pulmonary problems. A decoction of the branches has been applied as a poultice to swelling of the limbs. The plant is a folk remedy for toothache, facial neuralgia, and paralysis of the tongue, venereal diseases, and has been used to try and induce pregnancy. Okay, let's put a big old caveat on that, a big disclaimer. Most likely you don't want to be using this plant at all internally. Okay, I mean, obviously it does have some limited use, but I don't see how it's going to help induce pregnancy. They did say that the hot, in one source I read, the hot nature of it could bring on menses, so I'm not seeing that at all. and I'm not thinking this is a safe one to play around with. But the Peterson Field Guides to Eastern Central Medicinal Plants says American Indians use the bark tea as a laxative. Minute doses cause a burning of the tongue and salivation. Folk remedy for toothache, facial neuralgia, and paralysis of the tongue. Warning: poisonous. Causes severe dermatitis with redness, blistering, and sores. So, while limited medicinal use on that, big warning on the toxicity. And now we're going to get into one with an even bigger warning on the toxicity. Well, you know what? Before we get into that, we will get into that one maybe next week. Let's start with one. Okay, I just want to balance this out. I'm going to skip ahead to one that is useful and not poisonous and you can use. So I don't want to just give you two plants that you can't use. Let's get one to one you can use. And it's Elaeagnus, autumn olive, or oleaster. Not oleander, which is very poisonous and was the one I was going to talk about. Oleaster. Now, autumn olive, widely used in herbal medicine in the past, not so much these days, should be though. Unfortunately, in America, it's considered an invasive weed. What does that mean? Nothing actually. It will spread and take over, and it can crowd out other species. But remember, what's the definition of a weed? It's a plant growing where someone doesn't want it to be. I don't know when we decided we got to dictate where plants grow. People say, well, a native plant's not a weed. An introduced plant can be a weed. Okay, native to when? When did that plant get here? Did it come over with a bird or carried by winds and clouds 10,000 years ago? Did it come over on, in the pocket of what they call the first peoples, way early American Indian, like came over across the Bering Straits, or, over on a canoe or kayak from the Polynesian cultures 10, 20,000 years ago? Did it come over stuck to the clothing of somebody coming over on the Mayflower? I mean, when did it get here? How did it get here? Did somebody bring it up from Mexico? Did it, whatever, right? There's no such thing as a native plant. They all came to wherever you are at some point. Thousands of years ago, we were in an ice age. Nothing was growing here. Before then, the world was only covered in giant ferns and asparagus. Nothing is like absolutely indigenous to the place where you find it. It all came here at some point. So now they say, well, kudzu is taking over and it's strangling out the native plants. Well, they're fighting it out, and eventually kudzu would be considered a native plant, even though it was introduced to the United States in the 50s and mainly spread by the government for erosion control. In 10,000 years, kudzu would be considered a native plant. I could go on and on like that, garlic mustard, but autumn olive is considered invasive, and it's so bad for the native species. Well, 23 varieties of Elaeagnus or autumn olive have been documented as having use in herbal medicine. Yeah. Not to mention, they're tasty and edible. Wildlife eats them. Yeah, I don't have a problem with them. Honestly, you can see illegal to plant autumn olive in some places. I don't have a problem with them at all. I definitely prefer them to privet, which is also not native. If the autumn olive wants to fight it out with the privet, that's fine. But then again, a lot of birds and deer and such rely on the privet these days because their native habitat has been so disrupted by real estate development and golf courses and parks, which are absolutely unnatural. Why are we worried about weeds when we're just ripping up millions of acres and turning it into something that was never intended to be and can only exist due to herbicides, pesticides, and chemical fertilizers? I don't get it. I don't get it at all. I think, if I'm not mistaken, autumn olive is a nitrogen-fixing plant, which means it actually enriches the soil and everything that grows around it. If not, it's probably a C4 plant, which means it's carbon fixing. I know it's in one of those two categories, and I think it is nitrogen fixing. So, hey, my controversial opinion of the week, but none of the autumn olive, of course, is native to my region. I don't think any of the autumn olives are native to North America. But people have brought in Elaeagnus multiflora, which is gummy berry or cherry silverberry, one of the most delicious berries on the face of the earth. Gummy berries and goji berries are just awesome, actually, and really, really, really good for you. Elaeagnus pungens, that's thorny olive or silverthorn. That's the one a lot of people don't like. And Elaeagnus umbellata, which is the autumn olive or serviceberry in its common form. That's the one most people call autumn olive. Um, I like weeds, and I like to eat the weeds, and I honestly don't mind at all if I find where someone got planted some autumn olives of any variety and let them get out of control because, hey, that's free food. It's actually tasty, right? Um, let's see, how bad is Dioscorides? Oh, yeah, Dioscorides wrote of autumn olives. So um, this was the oleaster, as he called it, and it was called the Ethiopian olive tree. Now, it does somewhat resemble the olive tree, totally different species, though. And he describes it, and then he says the olive tree and wild olive tree bear such a gum as the autumn olive or oleaster. It's good for moisture of the site and rubbed on it cleans scars. Moisture of the site. I guess he means for dry eyes. I don't know. And rubbed on it cleanses scars and white spots on the cornea of the eyes. Wow. I'd want to see some medical evidence of that before I go putting some kind of sap in my eye because you don't want to risk damaging your eyes. So hopefully, some modern medicine will look into this at some point. I'm not going to experiment with that one. Um, it induces the movement of urine and the menstrual flow and is effective for toothache put into the cavities. It is categorized among medicines that are destructive. It expels the birth and cleanse impetigo. So we get rid of afterbirth, help remove it, I should say. And impetigo, which is a skin infection. This is pretty good. And lepra. That's an old term for psoriasis. Uh, the the wild olive tree is also called the Ethiopian olive tree, which is what we now call autumn olive. So apparently it originates in Ethiopia. So Moncrief called it oleander and said it was an evergreen ornamental shrub. And yeah, I mean it's pretty was at one point, probably the 60s, used commonly in landscaping, and now it's, like I said, actually illegal to plant in some places. Interestingly, she says that the wood has a toxicity and that prunings and dead leaves should be kept away from animals, and the wood should not be used for barbecue fires or skewers because the smoke could cause an irritation. Um, John Gerard actually listed it in 1633. He said, "This tree being outwardly applied, as Galen saith, has a digesting faculty, but if it be inwardly taken, it is deadly and poisonsome." So, yeah, that's, when Discordies was talking about putting the sap in your eyes, I thought, that's probably a really bad idea. A really, really bad idea. But getting up to, and he warns against letting cattle graze on it and such. Plants for a future, getting up to modern times, says of gummy berry, which, like I said, is really tasty. And again, the berries are good. I'm not eating the wood, so or the leaves here. It said the fruit of many members of this genus are a very rich source of vitamins and minerals, especially in vitamins A, C, and E, flavonoids, and other bioactive compounds. It is also a fairly good source of essential fatty acids, which is fairly unusual for fruit. Yeah, fruit doesn't usually have fatty acids. It is being investigated as a food that is capable of reducing the incidence of cancer. Yeah, gummy berries are strongly anti-cancer. I mean, strongly antioxidant. And also as a means of halting and reducing the growth of cancers. The leaves are used in the treatment of coughs. The fruit is prescribed in the treatment of watery diarrhea. The root is astringent, and a decoction of it is used to treat itch and foul sores. And remember, going way back, what was the Dioscorides said, used for psoriasis. So, yeah, I mean, for over 2,000 years, people have seen these properties. Of autumn olive, specifically, the flowers are astringent, cardiac, and stimulant. Cardiac means it affects the heart. The seeds are used as a stimulant in the treatment of coughs, and expressed oil from the seeds is used in the treatment of pulmonary affections. The fruit of many members of this genus are rich in source of vitamins and minerals. We just said that. Good fatty acids. being investigated as a food that is capable in reducing the incidence of cancer and also a means of halting and reversing the growth of cancers. So, yeah, so that's one that's going to be considered a weed that I think has great food potential, incredible medical potential, especially if it can help with cancer, but it also has, uses for chest pain and coughs and psoriasis and all that. And I can't recommend you grow it, just as with kudzu and garlic mustard and a lot of my favorite herbs that are among the most useful plants on the planet. It may be illegal where you live. You know what's crazy? Where I live, it's illegal to plant gooseberries and currants. Throughout pretty much the rest of the United States, people grow gooseberries and currants and eat the fruit or make jams and jellies or make excellent wines. Gooseberry wine is like the national wine of England. I mean, wine grapes don't grow well in England, but they make great gooseberry wine. They make wines out of different things, actually. A lot of different berries and plants that aren't, there's, country, rural traditions of making wine that go back thousands of years. Elderberry and gooseberry are right among the top. Where I live, it's illegal to grow gooseberries. And that's because there is a fungus, I guess, a rust, a bacterial rust, or fungal, I guess it's a fungal rust, that can occur like on 1 in a million or 1 in 10 million gooseberry or currant bushes, rebase species, they're closely related, that can infect Christmas trees. And Christmas trees became a major industry in the region where I live in the, I guess the 60s, 70s. It's dying out now as people are getting more artificial trees from Walmart. People aren't growing Christmas trees anymore. It doesn't matter. It's still illegal to plant gooseberries, as there's a 1 in like 10 million chance that a gooseberry could infect a Christmas tree. So our laws are pretty darn stupid. In fact, I know where an old homestead is up a mountain trail, and they actually had gooseberries growing in their yard. So I know where I can go collect some, but nobody else in my county can get any, apparently. All right, y'all. Have a good one, and remember the immortal words of Ronald Reagan: the scariest words in the English language are, "We're from the government and we're here to help." So y'all have a good one, and I'll talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.